The British Eighth Army was in a critical situation in the summer of 1942. After being defeated at the Battle of Gozala, Erwin Rommel's Panzer Army Africa was forced them to flee. The passage could not be halted, and the Suez Canal and Persian oil resources were at stake. British theater commander Claude Auchinleck chose to assume command himself. Instead of retreating to create defensive lines, he deployed the Eighth Army to a new line near Alamein, a small railway station. The Katara Depression, a low-lying salt marsh area that restricted heavy armor and vehicle transit, flanked this strategic operation. A 40-mile bottleneck between the Mediterranean and the Katara Depression severely limited Italian and German maneuverability. Because of this congestion, they were eventually able to halt the German advance during the First Battle of Alamein. While both sides were licking their wounds, the Eighth Army began to plot their inevitable counterattack. This combat would go down in history as one of the most renowned of the Second World War, an old-school infantry march across deadly minefields reminiscent of the First World War rather than the Second. A battle that would demonstrate that the tide of war had truly shifted in favor of the Allies. The Axis forces in North Africa were in serious difficulties by the second part of 1942. The ongoing Battle of Stalingrad was their first priority, and supplies had to be carried over the contested Mediterranean Sea, stretching their resources to the breaking point. Malta, which was still under Allied control, hampered their supply lines. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery took command of the Eighth Army, bringing reinforcements and threatening to tilt the scales in favor of the Allies. In the desert, tanks like the M3 Grant and Sherman were becoming increasingly effective, giving the Allies an advantage. Montgomery designed a clear strategy for success, emphasizing overwhelming firepower and numerical supremacy. The major attack was concealed by deception tactics, while key intelligence from Ultra, the Allies' code-breaking activities, offered valuable insights into enemy forces and supply concerns. The Second Battle of Alamein began on the night of October 23, 1942, with a heavy barrage to soften Axis defenses. Engineers had to clear deadly mines as infantry approached under the cover of a creeping barrage. Despite Rommel's counterattacks in defensive minefields, Montgomery's plan continued to grind down Axis forces. On November 2, Operation Supercharge marked a watershed moment. British and New Zealand infantry fought valiantly, allowing tanks to pass through. It was a heated struggle reminiscent of trench combat in World War I. Recognizing the overwhelming odds, Rommel chose to retreat against Hitler's orders. He sent in his remaining reserves, but the Axis troops were broken, forcing Italian men to surrender. The Eighth Army, exhausted, chased the retreating Axis forces, but heavy rains slowed the pursuit. The Second Battle of Alamein was a watershed moment in World War II. Winston Churchill stated, "Before Alamein, we had never had a victory. After Alamein, we had never had a defeat." This conflict demonstrated the significance of material strength, logistics, and tactical ability. Montgomery's foresight and precise planning were critical in winning victory. In the days that followed, Allied forces arrived in French Morocco and Algeria, and Rommel was pursued by the Eighth Army. The war for Tunisia, on the other hand, would be a tough undertaking.